Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I am going to pass it over to Aaron from Deluxe.
Thank you very much, Melissa. So today I'm just going to introduce to you your speaker for the day. Your speaker is Murray Smith. Murray is a principal with the Achievement Center, also known as TAC, a Canadian company that helps organizational leaders make better decisions and bridge the gap between knowing what to do and doing it. Murray helps businesses achieve better results with results-focused sales training, leadership development, employee engagement, and strategic planning. For 11 years, Murray was a part-time faculty member at Conestoga College School of Business, teaching leadership and organizational behavior courses to Canada's future business leaders. Murray is a member of the board of directors at the Cambridge Chamber of Commerce, where he contributed to building The Hive, a small business incubator and development center operated by the Cambridge Chamber of Commerce. Bringing his real-world experience to the workplace, classroom, and the boardroom, Murray engages people in results-focused learning experiences. Murray's areas of focus include cultivating leadership cultures which value the people who produce the results, enhancing sales and service professionalism which drive results, and aligning corporate vision and frontline realities to foster a climate of trust and excellence which accelerates results. Please give a warm welcome to Murray Smith.
Thanks, Aaron, for that introduction. I should note that we got the Hive started and then COVID hit us. So that's on hold at this point. But once we get through this COVID pandemic, we expect the Hive to start to be buzzing again, if you will pardon the pun. I'm just going to take a moment here and share my screen and get things started. Okay, Melissa, can you acknowledge that you can see the screen?
Yes, I can see the screen. It looks good.
All right, perfect. Thank you very much. So my assignment today with you is to discuss time management, or I think a more accurate description as showing on this title slide is time and priority management. Now, this is a thing that challenges all of us, including me, and I train this stuff. So the presentation, I think, is going to go maybe 50 minutes of this hour, 45 minutes to 50 minutes, leaving a bit of Q&A time at the end. So if you have some questions, you can put them in the chat box or you can bring them up at the end and I'll try to answer them. And if I don't have enough time to get to all the questions, I'll ask Melissa to pass them on to me and I'll respond by email through her or directly if that's appropriate. And then at the end of the session, well, tomorrow actually, Melissa will send you an email with some time and priority management tips from this session. So let's get started with a short poll about what causes you the most time management stress. Melissa is going to put that poll up now. And go ahead and answer. Maybe you can only answer one. You could try to answer several if you like, but time stresses tend to be things like you have too much work to do, or surprises come up, or interruptions, constant emails and other social media interruptions, and procrastination or personal distractions. Okay, so that's it there. A pretty broad cross section. Nobody admitted to procrastination as being their #1 issue, but those surprises that come up that you hadn't planned for, yep, those are big issues. Well, you may be hoping that I'm going to recommend some perfect system that will solve your time management issues. And I'm sorry to disappoint you, but I am not going to be able to recommend a perfect system because it actually doesn't exist. A report from timesy.com found that the average person has used or tried to use at least 13 different methods for managing their time. Now, here are a few that come to my mind. Think about the ones that you use. Your Outlook calendar. You may have task management or time management apps on your phone, Perhaps your business uses some sort of CRM system that you check into. Maybe you're old school and you use notebooks or checklists and task lists. In that calendar, perhaps you do time blocking and color coding, or you're into more of the fancy systems of the day, such as bullet journaling. Now, how many of these things do you use? I use a notebook. I'm old enough that I like it on paper. So I use a notebook. I use a daily task list. I have a CRM in my Outlook calendar. It is time coded and color blocked, and it's a system that works for me. Now, I have a friend who's older than me, and he has everything on his phone in apps. And he has tried to convince me of the virtue of the system that he uses. I find it annoying and frustrating. He finds it liberating. He thinks my system is unworkable. I think his system is beyond my understanding. But the point is, his system works for him and my system works for me, and that no system is perfect, but you still need one. You need to have a system. It's not a question of finding the best system that's out there, but rather one that is effective for you and for your needs. So find or make one that works for you and stick with it. And don't let your friends convince you that there's necessarily a better way. Certainly investigate better ways, but find something that works. Now, there's a couple of things that I want you to keep in mind too when we're thinking about time management. And these are 4 truths that are important. We have 168 hours in the week. Now, you can say that in a very positive way. Wow, we've got 168 hours in a week, or it can be negative. We only have 168 hours in a week, but that's the truth. There's 168 hours in a week. For most of us, there's more work on our plates than we have time to complete it. But not everything on that list is important. So priority management rather than time management becomes a key to success. Figuring out what things are most important and most urgent. Here's another important principle to remember, and that is the 80-20 rule. And this applies to our work and time as much as it applies to so many other things. What this suggests and what studies indicate is about 20% of the actions that we take lead to about 80% of the results that we seek. That's important. 20% of the actions that you take create 80% of the outcomes that you seek. Now, notice that I said it's 20% of your actions and not your effort. 20% of specific actions rather than effort. And this is difficult for us to sometimes get our heads around, but what we're talking about is identifying what are the high value actions that produce the greatest results, and how do we prioritize those? And you probably know what some of them are. They come to mind. The hard actions are pretty clear. You've got a deadline, and the work is driven by that deadline, and that work by the deadline produces an important outcome. You've got to write a sales proposal. You've got to finish a project design. You've got to deliver documents to somebody as some examples of hard activities and hard deadlines. But what about the soft ones? Things like developing client relationships and networking. If you're in sales and business development, this is an important activity, but it doesn't have tight boundaries on it. And it can feel for a long time like nothing good is happening compared to closing the deal and delivering the product or the service. What about top of funnel sales activities or quiet thinking and creative time? You know, if you're in marketing or engineering or even in your business, if you're an entrepreneur in business and you're considering your strategy, that quiet thinking and creative time is also a critical activity that will lead to large results. So I encourage you to take a moment now. I hope you've got something to write with, and write down a couple of your high value activities or actions that you do on a regular basis or should do on a regular basis. And I'll pause for 10 or 15 seconds for you to think about that and write down 3 or 4 high value activities that you do. Okay, now think about some of the daily things or weekly things that you do that could be classified as low value activities. Things that really don't produce much of a result. And we have a broad scale. We've got on one side of it is high value, game changer, makes a big difference stuff, all the way down to low value and to wasted time. So I'm not talking about necessarily the stuff that's clearly wasted time, but what are some low value activities that you do? And I'll pause for 10 or 15 seconds for that. Okay, so you have these 2 lists. And as you look at them, the high value activities are, they're clearly high value. They're things that probably you should be doing. But if you look at that list of low value activities, here's the trap. Some of those low value activities from your perception or experience may actually still be important activities for the business or the organization. But the question is, are they high value or important activities for you to be doing? Or should they be somebody else doing them? Should they be your priorities? Or should they be somebody else's priorities? Or maybe at the extreme, why are they being done anyway? Now, let me give you an example. For me, I'm a solopreneur. Bookkeeping and accounting activities are critical business activities. Creating marketing materials, it's a critical business activity. They're important to my business, but they are very low value activities for me to do. So I don't do them. When I started my business, I thought I was going to save time and money by doing my bookkeeping myself, and it was a terrible disaster. I now have a bookkeeper and an accountant. I don't have to think about that except for the minimal requirement that I have to provide the receipts and the documentation so that the bookkeeper and the accountant can do their work. Same with marketing creative. My job is to provide the idea, to describe what I need to have marketed and the message that I want to send out, but I give it to a marketing person to develop. Here's another one for you. If you have employees, who does your payroll? Deluxe Payroll could be the answer for this. It's a high value or important activity, but is it a high value activity for you to do? Or should you have a service like Deluxe Payroll doing that service for you? So ask yourself, what am I currently doing that could or should be done by somebody else or not at all? Now, I encourage you to do this exercise afterwards. Look at the day or the week. In fact, I'm going to get into that a little bit more. Do some analysis on the work that you are doing and ask yourself these questions. Is this something that I should be doing? Is it something somebody else should be doing, or should it be done at all? And one of the challenges that catches us here often is when we get promoted into a new job or a new position. And we hold on to some of those old tasks that are comfortable, that you're good at, that because you were good at, they created the opportunity for you to get the new job, the new promotion. I was talking a few years ago with a CEO CEO of a 200-person company. He had been the CFO of that company before. And because of his CFO training, he liked to work on the financial statements. He had a perfectly good CFO that had replaced him, but he liked to keep his finger in, he liked to keep his interest in, and he justified it because that's his training. until his new CFO said to him, that's my job. Your job is to be CEO. Let me do the CFO stuff so you can do the CEO stuff. And so sometimes we get stuck in less productive work, even without realizing it. Sometimes we get job role creep as well. So we take on something that's supposed to be temporary and it becomes permanent. And then we get stressed because we think we have a time management problem, when it is more likely a task priority problem. Now, this stress is real. It's important for us to acknowledge that the stress that we all feel from time to time is real. Here's some statistics about time stress from some different websites that I was consulting. So 46% of the stress reported amongst employees in the US, and I'm sure that it is similar in most developed, industrially developed countries such as Canada, but 46% of that stress reported by employees is caused by an overwhelming workload. The average manager, if you're in a management position, spends about 3 hours a day handling unforeseen interruptions and problems. So keep that in mind when you're planning your day. 2 or 3 hours a day are going to be taken up by unforeseen interruptions. People at work receive on average 7 or 8 disruptions per hour. That's 50 to 60 per day, most of which are unnecessary. Now, this is a hard one because some of them are necessary. Some of them you have to respond to. But we have devices in our pockets, in our purses, and sitting on our tables that tend to interrupt us without our permission. Well, we give them permission because we set our notifications for them, but they create interruptions. And on average, we spend about 2 hours per day recovering from those interruptions and distractions. You've all experienced this. We've all experienced this when you get into the zone and you're really super productive and then something happens to draw you away and it takes you time to get back into that zone again. In fact, sometimes you never get back to the zone. You're always being interrupted. So are you feeling any stress thinking about this and looking at these statistics? I suspect you are, and you thought you were coming to this workshop to find ways to relieve that stress. Well, let's move into the relief if we can. Work-life balance. Now, this is a trap sometimes. Work and life balance is critically important. We want to have that. But the trap occurs when we try to balance every single 24-hour period. When we try to keep every day in perfect balance, 8 hours of work, 8 hours of personal and family time, and 8 hours of sleep. Life, you know this, it does not work that way. And any attempt to make it so, to fix it on these 24-hour periods, will create more stress and dissatisfaction when the entire pursuit and object of balance is to reduce stress and increase satisfaction. Now, perhaps you've noticed people who seem to have this work-life balance thing figured out most of the time, and maybe you're one of them. What's the secret? Well, here's one element to help with the balance formula. I mentioned at the beginning of this presentation that we all have 168 hours in a week, 168 hours in a week. And it is easier to balance across 168 hours of a week than it is to try to do it 7 times in 24-hour periods through that week. There's a great book on this subject called 168 Hours, You Have More Time Than You Think. It is written by Laura Vanderkam. 168 hours, you have more time than you think. And she makes this case in the book. When we try to manage day to day on a 24-hour period, we create stress because some days require more effort and intensity than others. It's just a fact of life. And some days require far less. So on those days that are harder and longer, we stress out because we're working too hard. And on those days that are lighter and less intense and can be shorter, we stress because we're not working hard enough. It's a no-win situation, isn't it? But when we consider a 1 week time frame of 180 hours, it's easier to balance that 1 week time frame than 1 day. So consider this: if the week for you starts at 6 o'clock in the morning on Monday, midweek is Thursday afternoon at 6 p.m. That's 84 hours. Now, in that 84-hour period of time, if you wanted to, you could work 3 or 4 intense days and have a 3 or 4 day weekend every week if that satisfied your need for balance and if your business operation could operate that way. Or the flip side of it is you could spread your week out over 7 days. You could work every day, but work fewer hours over 7 days if that satisfied your need for balance. What I'm attempting to illustrate here is that we do have more time than we think. And so planning over the week gives us more choice, more flexibility, and probably more stress. Some days are going to be heavier. Some days are going to be 12-hour days. Some days are going to be lighter. You might only need 3 or 4. You will be less stressed with 1 week planning rather than 1 day 7 times over the week. This concept was a game changer for me. It's the nature of my business. Some days, and the nature of me, some days I'll work 12, 14 hours. And other days, I can get away with only having to work a few or maybe 6. And in the beginning, I got guilty about feeling like I was spending too much time at work, and then guilty that, well, I didn't spend enough on those lighter days. Now I understand that my work week is my plan. And so I can plan in my personal time, my family time, my goof off time without feeling guilty about it. Now, I suspect a few of you are thinking, that's nice, Murray, 168 hours, I get it, but I'm already working long days and I'm already catching up on the weekends. I'm using more of those 168 hours than I want to. I get it, I understand. So let me address this. First of all, perhaps you do have too much work to do. Perhaps that is true. And if you do, that means that there are probably deeper organizational issues here. Organizational structure, HR issues, workflow issues at your place of work or at your business. And if that's the case, that's a different issue and a different conversation and a different presentation. And I can help you another time if you would like to ask me more about that. A second situation could be that you do have too much work to do, but it's a temporary situational condition. It's maybe there's a project deadline, a critical project deadline, and it's all hands on deck and everybody's working long hours, but it's going to be over in a few days or a week. Or maybe somebody quit, a critical person quit in your organization. It means that that workload is distributed among everybody and it's creating extra work for a short period of time until a replacement is hired. These are brief. They should be brief, and you just push through to the other side because it's temporary, and then you go back to your equilibrium. Now, if too much work is your reality, whether real or perceived, then consider this research that's cited by Laura Vanderkam that finds that sustained work beyond the typical 40 to 50 hour work week is actually highly ineffective and inefficient. So if you're working 80 hours a week all the time, those last 30 hours of your week are your least efficient. In fact, they get to the point sometimes of almost not worth doing at all. So here are 2 important questions to ask yourself about how you spend your time at work. What portion of the work that you are doing is most valuable to you and to the company? What portion of your work is actually focused on the company's purpose and on your core competencies and on your job requirements? And what else is taking your time? So you've got your core competencies, your core work, that's your high value stuff. And how much is being taken up by low value activities? Now, the answers to these questions can be startling if you have accurate data. And in order to answer them accurately, you need data. We have anecdotal evidence. We're tired, you're exhausted, you're stressed, you're working hard. There's no question about it, you're working hard. And we can tell ourselves that we're the hero because we're putting in that 60 hours or 70 hours or more. And while this is all true, is it an accurate description of the work? And I want to encourage you to figure out the answer. Years and years and years ago, I worked in a call center. It was miserable. I spent a year working there. And I thought I was working hard. We were meant to call 200 people a day, make 200 calls out a day. And the metrics of that company said that if we called those 200 people, we would get our share of leads and sales. And I wasn't coming anywhere close to my sales targets. And I was complaining. I was exhausted. I was working hard. I was truly working hard. And so I complained to my manager, and she opened up my computer to my call logs. I didn't know there was such a thing. I was fairly new at the organization. She opened it up to the call logs, and it showed that on average over the 2 weeks before I made this complaint to her, I was making 65 to 70 calls a day, not 200. I was only making about 1/3 of the allotted call volume, but I was working hard. And so then she went to the 2 neighbors of mine, one on each side of my desk, and she opened up their call logs. They were complaining about the same things. Guess how many calls a day they were making? About the same as I was. It was a startling realization that we were spending too much time talking between calls. We were spending too much time in low productive activities. And surprise, surprise, once my call volume came up to that target of 200, I started hitting the metrics that were expected of that call work. Now, what I suggest to you to do is do a time study to find out the truth of your work. Do a time study over 2 weeks, because 1 week can be weird, but do a 2-week time study. It's a simple time study. There are plenty of documents that are available for this. You can make up your own on an Excel spreadsheet and simply list the things that you do each day and the time it takes to do them for 2 weeks. Then group your work each week into the categories that make sense to you. Maybe it's project work calls and emails, meetings that you've attended. You can even classify them as good meetings and poor meetings, personal time, phone calls, social media, chatting with other people and non-work related things. Be honest with yourself on this when nobody's looking. You don't have to report it to anybody. Nobody's going to check the data except for you. And then see the opportunities and gaps. Now, if your study shows that you are working mostly on important things for which you have run out of time consistently, then this time study will give you negotiating power to get help. I'm working with a client right now, and one of the manager of the maintenance department is complaining he needs more help. He needs to hire more people. And maybe he does. But he's only going on anecdotal evidence right now that they are busy. The suspicion is that they are not being very efficient in the workspace, and that there are efficiency gains that can be had before hiring another person. And this time study exercise is being done with him. Now, he's not very happy about it because he thinks he knows the answer, but data is truth. Now, what's often going to happen is, rather than finding that you are almost 100% busy on critical action things and you really do need more help, is that there are probably going to be opportunities to strengthen your time and priority management. Now, the objective of this exercise is not to turn you into a robotic efficiency machine, but rather to help you become a wise steward of your time and to master your priorities. We are human beings, and we need that downtime. We need social time. We need to have some time wasting time even in our day. It's how we recharge. So we're not machines. We don't run for 8 or 10 hours and then you turn the off switch. We run for an hour or 2 or 3 if we're into something really important, and then we need a break and we need to recharge. And The point of this time study is to find out how much of your day is actually spent on urgent and or important and critical things, and how much is spent on non-urgent things, maybe things that are not urgent for you, but then you can do something else about it. Now, you may be familiar with Stephen Covey and the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. It's in that book where he popularized this urgent and importance matrix of task and priority management. Our days are filled with all kinds of tasks and jobs that have varying degrees of importance and urgency. If you look at sector number 1, that describes things that are both urgent and important. Those can be those surprises that show up in the day that have to be fixed. Those are critical activities, often deadline driven. They're things you have to do now. Maybe they were on the schedule because you had a deadline, or maybe they have come up and they are a crisis. You have to do them now. Quadrant number 2 is things that are important but not urgent. They are success-oriented tasks. They are things like marketing or networking or staring out the window and thinking creatively about problem solving. They are things that don't have urgent pressures to them but are important to your work and to your business. This also can include and should include your leisure time and fitness and other personal exercises, personal time. Those don't necessarily fall within work, but they are important activities for you in your 168 hours. These are things that you schedule. And you want to put them in the schedule and fight hard to protect that scheduled time from the other things that pop up, including those Sector 1 crisis activities. Sector 3 there on the bottom are things that are urgent but not important. They may appear to be urgent, and maybe they are for the company, but perhaps not for you. They are things like requests from others for your attention. They are chores that do not contribute to your own goals. They are emails and social media notifications. And the reason that they're urgent is because our notifications make them urgent. If your phone bings or pings or buzzes, or the notification on your email pops up, it catches our attention and we can't help but respond to them. But is it important? Should we be doing it right now? And the fourth one is the things that are not urgent and not important. They're trivial interruptions, distractions, and time wasters. We want to avoid those things altogether. We want to spend most of our time in sectors 1 and sector 2, and especially in sector 2. The more time we can spend in sector 2, typically the fewer crises show up that are sector 1 activities. And to do this, to stay on the top half of this chart, we want to reduce or eliminate as much as possible the things that happen in sector 3 and sector 4. It's tempting to get distracted. We can get caught up in the quicksand of little things. We can sometimes justify ourselves. Oh, I'll just get all these little nuisance things off my list and get them done first so I have time for the important things. Sometimes that's a good strategy. But sometimes those nuisance things take so much time we don't get to the important. Many studies have shown, for example, of a sector 2 activity, if you spend 10 to 12 minutes planning your day each day, and I would suggest planning the next week, either on Friday afternoon or Sunday evening or Monday morning at some point each week at the beginning or end of the week, if you spend that time to 10 to 12 minutes a day, this is a sector 2 activity, you'll save up to 2 hours of time that would otherwise have gone to waste. On the other hand, the average knowledge worker checks email and instant messaging every 6 minutes. Think about how that creates distraction. And how often do we justify to ourselves, I'm just going to have a look. I'm just going to have a look. Or it might be important. I'm waiting for something important. That's a temptation. That's a problem, because if you really are waiting for something important, you have to look at everything until the important one shows up. But we just have a look and we lose time and momentum every time. So we lose 2 hours potentially of each day to these kinds of distractions. So unless social media is your job, turn off your notifications, and then set specific times in the day to respond to your emails and to check your social media updates. Controlling email and responding to at fixed times of the day turns this from a sector 3 or 4 activity actually into a sector 2 activity, because it's planned, it's controlled. And it's going to surprise you how much you will gain by looking after those big priorities first. Now, here's a challenging one. What happens when your boss or a coworker brings you a job to do that wasn't on your list? And if your mind is like mine, these are the things that go through the mind. Well, it must be important, or else why would they ask me to do this? And then we attach urgency to it because of who is asking. It's a boss, it's a senior person. And we also apply circumstances that have created the need to ask. We assume the circumstances that have created the need to ask. It must be necessary. And in fact, it could be, in fact, a sector 1 priority. But then why are we being asked to do this? Well, maybe it is your job. And so the assignment is proper and it is a sector 1 or sector 2 priority. Perhaps it's an unusual circumstance, but you have particular skills or knowledge to be able to do this. And it's an urgent task. So then again, it could be a sector 1 or 2 activity. Or perhaps you always say yes because of who is asking, and you end up doing work that should be done by somebody else. That makes it a sector 3 activity for you, even if the task itself is important. And you're likely already swamped with work, but you take it anyway because of who is asking without question, because how can you say no? It's your boss and there's a time deadline. And then the stress level goes up. And you complain to yourself, doesn't my boss know how much work I already have to do? And why is she asking me to do this? Clearly, she must know I have all of this other work that's critical. And the simple answer to that question is no, she doesn't know. She knows you're working hard, but she doesn't know how much work you're doing because you haven't told her and she can't read your mind. And since you keep taking the work, she'll keep giving it to you because you relieve her stress by taking the work. And also, you don't know if the task is truly urgent and important because you haven't asked. Can it wait a few hours or does it need to be done right now? So the stress goes up. Does this sound familiar? So how do you respond to this request? You are responsible for your time and your priorities. You need to know what sector this request falls into. So clarify it by asking clarifying questions. Don't just take it. You don't want to be obnoxious and resistant. You don't want to be that person in the office or in the workplace. But you want to manage your time, your priorities, and even manage the request from this person. So what is the task? Get clarity on what the task or the action is you're being asked to take. Why is it you? Ask. What is it you expect me to do? And what is it about this task and me? Is it your skills? Is it your expertise? Some of this may be obvious as you begin to ask the questions. Ask what's the time that is expected to take. Is this a 5-minute job? And 5-minute jobs never take 5 minutes. They always take 30. A 2-minute conversation takes 20 minutes. You know this. But ask what's the time required and what's the urgency? Is it something that is a crisis? Is it sector 1? It has to be done today, or can it be done by tomorrow or next week? What's the deadline? By doing this, you give yourself now information to negotiate your terms. Again, I'm not suggesting you're being difficult. I'm suggesting you engage in a professional conversation. So if this task is important for you to do now or build into your schedule, do you need to delay or delegate other things that you would normally do? You negotiate that. Should you be getting extra help to be able to complete those things that you also need to do? Should you be extending time and deadlines? There may be other questions that will come to mind in this negotiation. But you clarify the question, you clarify the assignment, you negotiate your terms of completing the assignment. I know this sounds rather abrupt. I'm talking about this in a pleasant, professional way. It's so that in the end, you can accept the assignment with confidence so that you're not stressed by it and not resentful. You can accept that assignment with confidence, or you can reject the assignment. Again, that's a strong word, but you reject or you pass on the assignment for valid reasons. What is more likely to happen is that you don't have to reject the assignment. The assignment is more likely to be withdrawn because the person that is asking you now has a more full understanding of what you are up against in order to take the assignment. Remember, your boss is giving it to you because she's stressed out, it needs to be done, and she thinks you're capable of doing it. When you clarify things, she may say, yes, I still need you to do this, and you take it with confidence, knowing what the terms and conditions are, or she says, oh, I understand this is still important, but everything else you're doing is urgent, and I don't want to take you away from it. I will find another avenue to get this done. So be a team player, but protect your management of your time and your priorities. Now, let me take a moment as we come towards the finish line to address procrastination. Procrastination is a common challenge in time and priority management. We all face it. It affects us all. It's because it's built into our genetic code, our safety DNA, to prevent us from taking unnecessary risks or things that could potentially put us in harm's way. And we could spend a whole session alone on this topic, but instead I will just touch on it here. Here's a question for you, and the poll that Melissa is going to bring up. What are some of your triggers for procrastination? I've suggested 5, and there may be more, but there we go. So the project or task is overwhelming and you don't know where to start, so we don't start. The project or task is new or unknown, so there's a fear of failure of outcome because we don't know what we're doing perhaps. The task has no clear deadline or urgency. There's always tomorrow, it can always put off. The task is not interesting to you. It lacks passion, so why get started? And the project actually demands more than you have in time or other resources. Okay, see, all of these are valid reasons why we might procrastinate. These are the triggers in our brain that prevent us from jumping off a cliff, from creating ourselves at risk. But often our perspective is on the fearful end rather than on how to get things started. So assuming that you have received an assignment, a task, a new job, and that you have clarified that task and that you've negotiated the terms, now we shouldn't feel the procrastination to the same extreme. We should be able to move forward. And on this next slide, I'm going to just show you a couple of strategies that you may want to consider for dealing with procrastination. And some of these things overlap. One of them is just do it. It's in the middle. I find that when I'm in my worst of procrastination, I need to combine the do it with the 15-minute rule or the break it up rule. The break it up rule is break down a large task into component pieces. And ideally, can you get them down into 15-minute segments? You know the parable, how do you eat an elephant? It's one bite at a time. We break them down into 15-minute segments. And in my experience, when I can get the first 15 minutes done successfully, I get into the rhythm of the project, and before I know it, I've done a few hours and I've moved the project along so far that the finish line now is clear and it's no longer fearful. Another one is to set a clear deadline. Even if there is no specific deadline, make one up for yourself. Ask for help, of course. And you can look at the delegate and delete. They're kind of related. Get it off of your plate. Some things you're never going to do, so take them off your to-do list. Don't let that item on the to-do list create stress because it's sitting there taunting you. Just get rid of it if you're never going to do it, or get rid of it by delegating it. Remove your distractions, the bottom box. So maybe you have to go into a quiet room. Maybe you have to close and lock your door and put a sign up that says 1 hour of do not disturb. You can't do it forever if you're in a management position, but you can do it for short times. And of course, set your notifications to silent on your phone, your email, and so on. And finally, make sure you reward yourself. And rewarding yourself can be the coffee break. It can be the opportunity to go and talk with a friend. It can be sitting back on your chair for 10 minutes and doing nothing. It can be taking the kids to the park. It can be anything that gives you that break that allows you to recharge before you head into the fight again. The thing is, you want to get into that zone of productivity. And getting started is half the battle, maybe even most of the battle when it comes to procrastination. Remember to focus on the high value tasks and responsibilities that you have to avoid the quicksand of busyness that can reinforce procrastinating behaviors. So I want to leave you with one final image, and then if there's questions, I will answer those. Oops, I went too far. Here we go. Fixing your time management logjam. Now this is an image of log drivers. And back in the day when lumberjacks were everywhere in Ontario and many parts of Canada, a common method of moving the trees that had been taken down, transporting the logs to the lumber mill was to toss them in a river and let the current carry them downstream. It was very effective, terrible for the environment, and that's not done anymore. But sometimes there would be hundreds of even thousands of logs floating on the water, and they would catch. They would create a log would catch on a rock, a rapid, or on an impediment along the shore, and it would create a log jam. In order to fix that, experienced log drivers, like these three shown here, would dance across the floating logs, and their job wasn't to move all of the logs. The job was to find the key log or key logs that were responsible for holding all of the other ones back, and to lever it into play, lever it out of the sticky spot and into the flow of the river. Now, this was a talent, dangerous work, of course, but it was a talent. An experienced log driver would be able to look at a pile of logs and know where to begin to work. And then the logs would flow again. Now, I think this is a good metaphor for time and priority management. Sometimes everything runs smoothly, and sometimes we get log jammed. And in that log jam, we stress. It takes over because the work piles up and piles up behind us as the logs are piling up in this image. The logs start piling up because there's too much work to do. They pile up because of unexpected surprises or because of annoying interruptions from other people. They pile up because we feel out of control on things like email and social media notifications, or because of our own procrastinations and other personal distractions. The secret here to time and priority management for you is to find out what that logjam is. And if you figure out what your time and priority management key log is that gets jammed up, and you can move it, everything else will move. So some ways to figure out this key log and to unjam your time and priority management logjam is to really know how you use your 168 hours in a week. Doing that time study will give you knowledge and power. If you really have too much work, you now have proof that you have too much work, and you can ask for help. You can legitimately make the case for help. If you find that you're spending too much time on less important stuff, now you have the knowledge and power to negotiate with others, including yourself, to focus more on the priority activities and delegate or delete or otherwise manage those low priority activities. Having a personalized time management system, whether it's a notebook or an app or a CRM, and using it to its potential for your effectiveness, gives you control. Knowing and focusing on your high value activities in those sector 1 and sector 2 areas of the time management grid produces the results that you're looking for. And the more success you have in sector 2, the fewer things happen in sector 1, and the less you are distracted by 3 and 4. And then finally, tackling procrastination, which, if we're all honest with ourselves, we each have to deal with from time to time, especially in those times of high stress. When we tackle procrastination with good procrastination strategies, the logs begin to move again, our time management priorities move again, and our stress comes down. So find your key log. Find the key thing in your time management struggle that enables everything else to flow, and develop that, and you will find that your solutions begin to happen more quickly. So that brings us to the end of this presentation. If you want more information, you have my contact information on the bottom of the screen, and I would be happy to talk to you about business work. I do business strategy and organizational development, as well as organizational and executive and individual coaching, and professional development training, such as leadership and sales training, to enable businesses to achieve, individuals and businesses to improve their conditions dramatically. So that's it from me. Melissa, do we have any questions in the chat box?
We do not have any questions as of yet in the chat box. If anyone does have any questions, you can either put it in the chat box, or you can raise your hand and I can unmute you so you can talk. Murray, it doesn't look like anyone has any questions at the moment.
Okay. Well, if you do have a question that you would like to email me or phone me at some time, you're welcome to do that. I appreciate your attention, and I look for you next time I'm invited to do one of these presentations with the Chamber of Commerce. Thank you, Melissa, for your help, and Aaron for your introduction. And I'll wish all of you a good day.
You're welcome, Murray. We do have one question that just came in.
Oh, perfect.
From Elizabeth Allen from Little Mushroom. What happens when you delegate a task and give a clear deadline and the person doesn't do it?
Elizabeth, that's a great question. And it's a frustrating one. Yes, it's a risk of delegating tasks. The question that I would have is, going back to the presentation I made about clarifying the task for you, making sure that you have delegated with clarity is important. And I'm not questioning whether, Elizabeth, you have done that. You probably have. Depending on the individual and their skill level, you may have to do some more monitoring as well, and set some check-in periods. So if the task is to be delegated and finished in 1 hour, there's not going to be any time to check in. But if it's 2 or 3 days or a period of time, you may want to set up some reasonable intervals for check-in. And by setting it up early, so for example, Elizabeth, I need you to finish this. It's Thursday afternoon. I need this finished by Tuesday. I'd like to check in your progress on Friday and again on Monday afternoon. And we carry on. Now, because I've set that up with you, I've set that expectation. When I come to check with you, you're not going to be threatened by me checking in. That expectation is clear. But if I did not set that expectation with you and I showed up on Friday afternoon and Monday afternoon, chances are your emotional response to me would be, I'm micromanaging you and I don't trust you. So that's a technique for creating check-in and accountability. Make sure you set those parameters up front as well. Elizabeth, does that answer your question? Does it help?
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay. Anything else?
No, nothing else has come through.
Okay. Let me just make one more comment then. This question is an excellent question, and it demonstrates the domino effect of this type of professional development. You know, in order to manage your time well, you will probably need to delegate some things. And there are effective and ineffective ways to delegate. So those are the next steps in this process. Delegation, training, coaching with people, helping the people that you are giving information and assignments to grow professionally. If you hang on to everything, they can't grow and you can't grow. When you delegate to others, it's risky. They might not do it as well as you can, but they will never grow to be as good as you if you don't delegate and coach and help. And so the two are completely intertwined. So I'll leave with that thought. Find your logjam, and you'll find the connections to all of the other ones. So thanks a lot.
Thank you everyone for joining. Have a good day.